Welcome, everyone, to another exciting episode of the BSK Insights podcast. I'm your host, Michael Karinian, Marketing Director at BSK Associates. Today's episode is for agencies and teams responsible for preserving and rehabilitating historic infrastructure, projects where documentation, regulatory compliance, safety upgrades, public visibility, and funding requirements all intersect. We'll explore how BSK Associates help streamline environmental and regulatory approvals while protecting the integrity of historically significant assets, and what agencies should consider before their next rehabilitation effort begins. So if you are a municipality managing aging or historic infrastructure assets, public agencies responsible for preservation and rehabilitation projects, transportation and public works teams navigating Caltrans requirements, project managers coordinating federally funded infrastructure improvements, environmental planning and compliance staff supporting historic asset projects, and lastly, agencies working on high visibility routes, gateways, bridges, or public landmarks. This episode is for you. And joining us in our episode today is someone who's no stranger to our podcast. It's our very own Stewart Thompson, Business Development Manager on the Geoprofessional side. And welcome, Stewart. Well, thank you for joining us and taking time to talk to us about this important topic.
Good morning, Michael. Yeah, I'm excited to be here for the second one. And I don't know if you did that whole intro on one breath, but if you did, that was amazing.
I can hold my breath, man. I've been training for this.
But I just wanted to, I want to say that I'm excited to share this podcast today, kind of a continuation of our environmental podcast that we did the other week. And this is really an important one because it's a historical structure, a bridge that goes into a national park, and, really hopefully help create an understanding for our clients and hopefully future partners on what our environmental services group can help provide moving forward if there's any sort of renovation or project involving a historical structure. So excited to kick this one off today.
Perfect. Well, let's get right to it. I'm going to ask you the first question so we can kick this off. First question here is when a municipality or public agency takes on the rehabilitation of a historic structure, what does the documentation review process actually look like? And why is it so extensive under Caltrans and federal compliance standards? So again, did this all in one breath, so you appreciate that.
Yeah, no, it's a good question. It's a fair question. I think that the first thing people need to understand and realize is that you're not just collecting a couple of reports and old plans, especially when it comes to a historical structure. You're really building the entire story of this structure. So you're looking for any kind of construction, original construction, historical significance. Were there any past repairs, alterations, upgrades that occurred? What's the current condition and deficiencies that there may be within the structure as well? And then how proposed improvements may affect this historic resource. I mean, I don't know about you, but I love history. Originally I come from England, and it's a country full of history, and America has its own history too, right? We just celebrated 250 years, and I think it's really important that we preserve that part of what we do as we move forward and we progress as a country and in our infrastructure is not to lose the historical significance and things that make up our country. So, when it comes to involving Caltrans and federal funding, it's important that I guess it's more extensive, should I say, because, there's certain project objectives that we need to meet. Are we preserving the historic character and features of the structure? And then, we also want to minimize adverse impacts whenever possible. So regulators require this level of review because changes to historic infrastructure can be permanent and irreversible. And no one wants to be responsible for something that was a beautiful old artifact that had significance to our history and lose that.
Absolutely. We don't want to throw a highway on the Stonehenge, right? So that's not going to. So obviously, we have really awesome historic sites. We have beautiful landscapes and obviously we want to be careful and make sure that none of that is destroyed in the process of. So that's perfectly fine. And, I also love history, so I can appreciate that statement. I think that is exactly why we do what we do at BSK Associates, because, when we say we're here to help our community, that's exactly what it is. Whether it's preserving historical sites or artifacts and everything else we do to help with anything on the geoprofessional side, it really does help our community. So we're so thankful. It's like coming in and working for a nonprofit organization. That's kind of how I feel, because I take pride in the work I do, because I know that what I do has an impact for millions, actually. So I like what you said about that. I think that's absolutely relevant. And so with that, I do have a follow-up to this question, and that's what kind of records and research typically need to be pulled together to satisfy those compliance standards. I'm sure there's a lot to say about that.
Yeah, there's a decent amount. Typical documentation review may include, and it's probably not all inclusive, would be original construction drawings and as-built, any historical photographs, maintenance, inspection, rehabilitation records, cultural resource studies and National Register evaluations, environmental documents, and agency correspondence. So just a few that I can list off as you asked that question, that are definitely going to be part of the process for gathering documentation. And oftentimes the process involves archival and historical research, field investigations, condition assessments, and coordination with regulatory and reviewing agencies. So, there's quite a bit of not just, I say desk review and seeing what we can pull up online and from archives, but also the physical assessment and going out to that project too, to really get a full picture of, the research needed to gain the full picture to hit those compliance standards.
Absolutely. And I can imagine this will jump right into the second question on preservation and safety upgrades. They can sometimes feel like they're pulling in opposite directions. So how does attention show up in real projects, and why does it create added complexity and scrutiny?
I think one of the biggest challenges, and maybe I hit on it a little bit earlier, is that you're balancing the modern engineering requirements that they needed today with historical preservation goals, right? So historic structures are often not designed to today's standards, for seismic performance, for the structural capacity. We're talking about things that may have had horse and buggies drawn over these things, and that was the weight bearing concerns at the time. Now where you've got, especially into a national park, thousands of vehicles traveling over these things every day. Accessibility, ADA, and then public safety. So agencies have to find ways to upgrade the infrastructure while preserving that historical character and significance and really the art behind it, right? That draws people in and keeping that character. So as a result, often projects will face heightened review from preservation authorities, regulatory agencies, project stakeholders, and most importantly, the public. Well, I wouldn't say most importantly, all of those are important, but I think that ultimately, back to what you were saying, I equally love what we do and what we provide here at BSK, because it provides a critical service to the public. So the key objective really to develop the solution is, meeting the current safety and performance requirements, minimizing the impacts to the historic features, and then maintain the structure's historic integrity whenever possible.
Awesome. Well, that also brings us to our next question, which is federal funding brings significant resources to these projects, right? But it also brings strict regulatory processes. So what are the most common places where agencies run into risk of delays if those processes aren't properly managed?
Yeah, well, the delays kind of come from the question really is, if you're not managing the project proactively, then some of the delays address the environmental and cultural resource requirements. Let me go back. Some of the most common causes of the delay is addressing environmental and cultural resources requirements too late. So common schedule risks include, incomplete documentation, insufficient coordination between agencies, if you don't resolve stakeholder concerns early on, right? And then late identification of historic resource and impacts. So, problems often emerge during regulatory review when previously unknown issues are discovered. If you're missing certain key analysis, it's going to throw a roadblock in your project. And some of those roadblocks may be like you're going to have to pay out for additional studies. You're going to have to get more documentation. You're going to have to do design revisions. And then you may need additional stakeholder and agency consultation. So, those are really, those are costly, just not for time, but also for money and budget. So the late stage changes you're going to affect your project schedule, your permit and timelines too. So really, the proactive approach is the biggest attribute, and having that thorough investigation to eliminating those potential problems.
Absolutely. That you also answered my follow-up question, and that is, when do you begin thinking about this? Prior to the project, obviously, right? Yeah. You need to have good documentation and preparatory process in place, because you can't just jump into this, especially when it comes down to federal funding, and they're going to want all of the processes to be executed properly and in a timely fashion. So we would say, as a follow-up or a follow-up response, when do you begin this? You begin prior to the project. So I'd like to go ahead and jump right into question number 4, because I do think this is taking us to a more of a direction of looking at what those high-profile infrastructure looks like. So a gateway route to a national park or public visibility raises the stakes considerably. So how does BSK Associates approach these high-profile structures and help agencies deliver flawless execution under that kind of pressure?
Sure. Yeah, I mean, I'll go back to, and I'll say this every time, is we have an excellent team, we have an excellent team just across the board in the Geoprofessional division. We always say our secret sauce is our people, and that's not a slogan, that's not a phrase, that's just the truth, right? And so at BSK, we really emphasize proactive planning, technical excellence, and then transparent communication from day one. We're not gonna hide information. We're not gonna sit back and wait until the last minute, because that's not what's right, and that's not what's right for our client, and that's not what's right for us, and that's definitely not what's right for the project. So we're going to work closely with the agency staff. We're going to work with the engineering teams. Our approach really focuses on identifying risks and potential compliance challenges early in the project development. Early coordination is really going to develop your practical compliance strategies. It's going to avoid the one big thing that no one likes, unless it's at a birthday, is the big surprise. And it's going to reduce your schedule and your budget impacts, right? So we recognize that high visibility projects often receive increased public scrutiny. So that's why we prioritize having thorough documentation, clear and consistent communication, and we're going to anticipate challenges before they become obstacles. So really, our goal is to help the agencies navigate these complex regulatory requirements while maintaining project momentum. And I think that's true of all our disciplines and in our divisions, but our environmental group, they ace this stuff. This is a project that they're proud of, that we're speaking about today, and that they came through for our client.
Absolutely. And obviously I want to reinstate that, the proactive coordination factors, that really does streamline the approval process and helps with the project's overall success. So I think what you're saying is absolutely on par. It's on spot. And I do think that as we, in BSK, our approach is to do it right. And we make sure we serve our clients exceptionally. So when you talk about the secret sauce, I want to add on to that with the white glove treatment we provide. It's important for us to be that organization where we can come in and be a partner, because like I said, we care about our community, right? We care about the different locations that we serve in each of those communities and how that impacts the community. So, of course, we're going to approach it the right way. Let me ask you the last question here. For listeners who are looking ahead to a federally funded or historic infrastructure project, what should they be thinking about now to set themselves up for a clear and compliant path forward? What would you say about that?
I think we've probably hit this nail on the head so much that we can't even see the head of the nail in the wood anymore. But, it's taking that early start and thinking strategically. You don't want to be thinking about this stuff with the ball already rolling. This should be your first thing in your mind. So environmental, cultural, and regulatory considerations should be evaluated alongside the project scope, the funding strategy, and the design objectives. So early planning really helps agencies identify those risks and constraints earlier, and it helps you make better informed decisions. So it's going to maintain greater project flexibility because no project's perfect. You're going to run into an issue. You're going to run into something that holds it up. We don't want to be the reason, and environmental and the things we talked about through this podcast shouldn't be the reason why your project has a holdup. It should give you the flexibility to be able to have those holdups and still finish on time within the scope and have the desirable outcome that you're looking for, and hopefully avoid costly delays and redesigns. So it all supports realistic schedules and budgets, and taking the proactive approach will help you navigate the requirements, keep projects moving forward, and maximize available funding opportunities. So, I think really, Michael, and to kind of summarize all of this up is that, that proactive approach, that proactive strategy, the proactive communication and transparent communication, especially what BSK brings, builds trust. And with that trust, you're going to get you're going to get the resources and the dedication and the time and the outcomes that you need to effectively manage this project from A through Z.
Absolutely. Can't agree with you more. So, Stewart, any last words, anything you want to say as we come to an end to this podcast episode to our viewers, to our listeners, to our audience? How can they get in touch with you? Do you want to share that also and let us know how we can come alongside and help them?
Absolutely. So you can reach me. I believe my Calendly will be linked at the end of this podcast. So that's the easiest way to get in touch with me and put a holder on my calendar. And I'd love to reach out to anyone. I'm also active on LinkedIn. So Stewart Thompson, I spell it the right way, Stewart, not the UART, just in case. And you'll see my smiling face there too. So yeah, reach out to me through my Calendly. Reach out to me through LinkedIn. Obviously as business development, this is a shameless plug. I want to reach out to as many people as I can and create relationships and connections. And I truly believe what we have here at BSK sets us apart from the rest, and that's the team and the environment and the white glove service, like you said, that we offer. So yeah, reach out to me through the LinkedIn platform, or through Calendly, or I believe even my email is sthompson@bskassociates.com. Any of those works great. And I look forward to hopefully reaching out or getting reached out to and speaking with some people that might have some historical structures that they need some help with. And I can definitely forward you on to the experts in our environmental group.
Absolutely. Well said. So, folks, this ends our podcast episode. We thank you for joining us and staying with us to the very end. Always remember that we're here to help. So if you are viewing this podcast and you think there's someone that may need our services, feel free to pass along this podcast episode, share, like, do all of the above, and make sure that the message goes out. And so that, obviously we can come alongside you and help support you on the different projects, especially in this case with historic projects, that we can be helpful and obviously help our communities, right? So again, thank you for joining us. It was awesome being with you all today. We hope to see you on our next podcast. All right.
Yeah, thanks, Mike. I enjoyed it.
All right. Thanks. Bye.